Hey everyone, I'm Raf, welcome back to my channel. Today I am so excited to film this video because I'm going to be talking through all of the books that I read in the month of April, including my reads for the 2020 OWLs Readathon. I have a giant stack of books sitting next to me. 9 books were read this month, and so let's get straight into the video with my first read of the month, which was Identity by Francis Fukuyama. So this is a political non-fiction about the politics of identity, and I think it was a really interesting read that touches on a lot of topics that are relevant in politics today. I am new to political non-fiction, and so I really appreciated the fact that Francis Fukuyama gives a lot of historical background because it helped me to ground a lot of the theoretical ideas that he was presenting in something that I could understand. So that did help make the book feel a lot less dense, and it made the read easier, which is always a plus when it comes to non-fiction, because it takes me ages to read non-fiction books. For a short book, it actually spans a lot of really broad topics. So Fukuyama goes into political extremism on both the left and the right side of the spectrum, on people not wanting to hear what the opposition or the other side has to say, how technology is exacerbating that issue, how the identities of groups feel threatened with the recognition of new identities in groups in politics, how that leads to extremist movements like nationalism. It also looks at immigration, religious extremism, which is all very interesting. So yes, for a short book it goes into a lot, and it isn't too dense. It did take me a while to read, and I did have to reread sections because I am dumb. So now let's talk about the books that I read for the OWLs Readathon. I am so happy I partook in the readathon this year. It was so much fun. I did do a video explaining what the readathon is and the books that I was planning to read, so I will leave that down below in the description box if you would like to watch that. I did finish 7 books for the readathon, which was the requirement for the Hogwarts Professor career. The first prompt that I completed was for the subject that I teach, which I chose to be History of Magic. For that you have to read a book about witches or wizards. For this prompt I downloaded the Mythos audiobook written and narrated by Stevenson, and I absolutely loved it. So he retells tales of ancient Grecian mythology, and not once did it feel dense. It was so captivating and easily accessible. He was so witty with his commentary, and the narration itself of the audiobook just brought the characters and the tales to life, so I just fell in love with it. I would highly recommend picking up the audiobook if you're thinking about giving this a read. Also, I know that he has come out with Heroes, which is a follow-up book about the children of the gods and their tales, and I'm so excited for it, so I'm going to check if there's an audiobook and I'm going to pick it up very soon. The next prompt for the Hogwarts Professor career was Defense Against the Dark Arts, and you had to read a book set at sea. For this I was planning to read the Book of Dust just because there was a ship on the front cover. However, I read 60 pages and then realised that this is actually a follow-up novel to his Dark Materials series. A few people let me know this on Instagram as well when I posted about it, so I thought I would put this down, read his Dark Materials series first, and then I'll pick this up later. So I changed the book that I read for the Defense Against the Dark Arts prompt to The Devil's Ballast by Caddy. I had not heard of this before until I went on to NetGalley, and then I saw the title, and the publishers supplied me a copy to read for review, and I fell in love with this book. I was not expecting to love it this much. First of all, the cover is stunning, so that's what drew me in. 2, it is a pirate story. If you know me, you know I love pirate stories set at sea. 3, it is a true pirate story, so it just gets better, you know? The Devil's Ballast is a retelling of Anne Bonny's story, who is the most famous or infamous and notorious female pirate in history, and her adventures at sea. It was a gripping, fast-paced, adventurous, high-stakes story that I just flew through. I read it in like 2 sittings. I absolutely loved it. Let's start with our protagonist, Anne Bonny, who is an absolute legend. She is fierce, she is sassy, she is quick-witted, she is resilient and strong and shameless, but she's also not a two-dimensional character. The author really takes her beyond just a badass female pirate protagonist and really goes into her vulnerabilities. She is running away from her abusive husband, and she's held back by the laws and the social mores of living in the 18th century as a woman. She's a pirate hiding her female identity on a ship with an all-male crew. She just goes through a lot, and she grows so much, and it's just absolutely insane to think that these stories are true. The relationships in this story as well were so nice to read, both the romantic and the platonic ones. So you have Anne Bonny's love for her Captain Calico, who helped her escape her abusive husband and who believes in her as a female pirate, as well as her friendship with an unexpected pirate, Reed. And both of these relationships increased the stakes of the novel, but they were also in their depiction of camaraderie, a real glimmer of hope when it got really dreary and it looked like only the worst was going to happen. I'm clearly gushing too much about this book and I'm going to stop. All I'm going to say is it was one of the best reads of the year so far, and I highly recommend you check it out, especially if you are a lover of pirate tales like myself. Moving on. The next prompt that I completed was Care of Magical Creatures, and for this you have to read a book with a beak on the cover. And for this I chose to read Night Circus by Erin Morgensten, which is a beloved book on BookTube. And now I finally understand why. From the very first sentence, I fell in love with Erin Morgensten's writing and the setting that she created. It was so whimsical and mystical and magical. The concept of the circus itself led to the most dreamlike places being created on the page, and I just felt so transported and I fell in love. The only thing was that I wish there was more of the plot. I feel like I was waiting for it to pick up, for something to click, and it didn't until the last like maybe 60 pages, and I was, I don't know, I don't want to say disappointed, but I think I went in expecting it to be my next Six of Crows, which, if you don't know, is, in my eyes, the epitome of fantastic YA fantasy. So I know it's unfair to rate down a book because of preconceived expectations. I still love this book, I still highly recommend this book. Yes, I just wish there was more meat to the plot. The next prompt is Arithmancy, and for this you have to read a book that is outside of your typical genre. And for this I read my first ever graphic novel, Nimona, by Noelle, Stevenson, and I loved this book so much. It was a really fast read and a really heartwarming read. It drew me in, I fell in love with the characters, the art was beautiful. I'm so glad to have picked this up, to have been introduced to graphic novels. If any of you have good graphic novel recommendations, please leave them down below, because I would love to delve a little bit deeper. But yes, highly recommend this book. The next prompt is Muggle Studies, and that is to read a contemporary book from the perspective of a Muggle. And for this I read a historical fiction, The Parisian by Isabella Hammad, and this was a very intense, very beautiful book. It is a historical epic that follows the story of a Palestinian man who at the beginning of World War I goes to Paris to study so he can avoid being conscripted to war, and then 5 years later he comes back to Palestine, and it follows his journey trying to re-assimilate back into Palestine after being exposed to a vastly different culture and way of life in Paris. It was so interesting to read about that intersecting of different cultures. It really brought out themes of superstition and love and tradition. So the main character does return home at the end of World War I and at the dawn of the Palestinian nationalism movement. So Hammad is able to give both a really sweeping but personal insight into the different perspectives that are circulating in Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, about the mandate of the Western powers in the Middle East. So yes, I think there was a really strong political undertone that was very thought-provoking. I highly recommend this book. It did take me a while to get through, but I think it was very, very worth it. So the second last prompt was Potions, and that is to read a book under 150 pages. For that I picked up Here is New York by E.B. White. I loved this so much. I read it in like an hour, it was only 56 pages, but it was just a very beautiful, perceptive depiction of one of my favourite places in the world. It was also very honest about New York's beauty and ugliness, and I think that is what gives the city its charm, and E.B. White really picks up on that and brings it to life in this essay. So the last prompt that I completed for the OWLs Readathon this year was Astronomy, and that was to read a book while it is nighttime, and for that I read Cinder by Marissa, Meyer. I forgot how much I loved this book. I read this in one sitting. I finished it at like 1 AM one night, and I was an emotional wreck. I read this 5 years ago, I think, and I just forgot how much I loved it. So this is a sci-fi fantasy retelling of the fairy tale Cinderella, following Cinder, who is a cyborg mechanic in New Beijing, as she is brought into a plot of political intrigue following Emperor Kai in the palace, who is dealing with intergalactic diplomatic affairs because an evil Queen Lavana is trying to make her way into the Earthen Commonwealth, and that is bad because she is evil. So this is just such a fun book. The plot is not too complicated, it's simple but it's high stakes. You have characters like Cinder and Kai and Aiko and Peony and Dr. Elmond, I think his name is, and you just want them to be happy. I literally had to put this book down several times while reading it, just to collect myself. You know, I was laughing and crying and gasping as the characters were faced with all of these different challenges and plot twists, and I don't know, I think if a book can draw you in like that, then it's a good book. I ordered the rest of the series, so Scarlet arrived the other day, and I'm very excited to pick this up. I think it's going to be my next read. So I've got the entire series on its way. I cannot wait to reread it. And that is the end of my OWLs Wrap Up. I also listened to one more audiobook this month outside of the OWLs Readathon, and that was Neil Gaiman's book on Norse mythology, which was just as enjoyable as Mythos. It was shorter, and I have a little bit of a inclination to enjoy Greek myths more than Norse myths, but didn't know too much about Norse mythology going into this, and so it was really, really cool to learn about all of these new tales and legends, so I would also recommend that. And that is the end of wrapping up all of the books I read this month. I'm very happy. I feel like I enjoyed all of those books, and I would definitely recommend all of them. I hope you enjoyed listening to me rant and gush about them. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these, your thoughts on them. What books did you read this April? Let me know. I'm very curious. I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.